Gentlemen, students and scholars, teachers and trainers, professors and those who are listening, watching and preparing themselves for appearing NET and SLAT examination in English literature. Dear friends, you are listening the truth of language to literature. How the literature develops from science. There are so many connectivities, relativities associated with study along with the description of the historical days. In the age of Elizabeth, all doubt seems to vanish from English history. After the reigns of Edward and Mary, with defeat and humiliation abroad and persecutions and rebellion at home, the accession of a popular swan was like the sunrise after a long night. And in Milton's words, we suddenly see England, a noble and puissant nation, rousing herself like a strong man after sleep and shaking her invincible locks with the Queen's character, a strange mingling of frivolity and strength, which reminds one of that iron image with feet of clay. We have nothing whatever to do. It is the national life that concerns the literary student, since even a beginner must notice that any great development of the national life is invariably associated with a development of the national literature. It is enough for our purpose, therefore, to point out two facts: that Elizabeth, with all her vanity and inconsistency, steadily loved England and England's greatness, and that she inspired all her people with the unbounded patriotism which exults in Shakespeare, and with the personal devotion which finds a voice in the Fairy Queen. Under her administration, the English national life progressed by gigantic leaps rather than by, and English literature reached the very highest point of its development. It is possible to indicate only a few general characteristics of this great age that had a direct bearing upon its literature. Dear friends, what are the characteristics of this age? The most characteristic feature of the age was the comparative religious tolerance, which was due largely to the Queen's influence. The frightful excesses of the religious wars known as the 30 Years' War on the continental found no parallel in England. Upon her accession, Elizabeth found the whole kingdom divided against itself. The north was largely Catholic, while the southern countries were as strongly Protestant. Scotland had followed the Reformation in its own intense way, while Ireland remained true to its old religious traditions, and both countries were openly rebellious. The court, made up of both parties, witnessed the rival intrigues of those who sought to gain the royal favor. It was due partly to the intense absorption of men's minds in religious questions that the preceding century, though an age of advancing learning, produced scarcely any literature worthy of the name. Elizabeth favored both religious parties, and presently the world saw with amazement Catholics and Protestants acting together as trusted counselors of a great swan. The defeat of the Spanish Armada established the Reformation as a fact in England, and at the same time united all Englishmen in a magnificent national enthusiasm. For the first time since the Reformation began, the fundamental question of religious toleration seemed to be settled, and the mind of man, freed from religious fears and persecutions, turned with a great creative impulse to other forms of activity. It is partly from this new freedom of the mind that the age of Elizabeth received its great literary stimulus. It was an age of comparative social contentment, in strong contrast with the days of Langland. The rapid increase of manufacturing towns gave employment to thousands who had before been idle and discontented. Idle and discontented, increasing trade brought enormous wealth to England, and this wealth was shared to this extent, at least, that for the first time some systematic care for the needy was attempted. Parishes were made responsible for their own poor, and the wealthy were taxed to support them or give them employment. The increase of wealth, the improvement in living, the opportunities for labor, the new social content, these also are factors which help to account for the new literary activity. It is an age of dreams, of adventure, of unbounded enthusiasm, springing from the new lands of fabulous riches, revealed by English emperors, revealed by English explorers. Drake sails around the world, shaping the mighty course which English colonizers shall follow through the centuries, and presently the young philosopher Bacon is saying confidently, I have taken all knowledge for my province. The mind must search farther than the eye. With the new rich lands open to the sight, the imagination must create new forms to people the new words. Hakluyt's famous collection of voyages and perchance his pilgrimages were even more stimulating to the English imagination than to the English acquisitiveness. While her explorers search the new words for the fountain of youth, her poets are creating literary works that are young forever. Marston writes, why men, all their dripping pens are pure gold. The prisoners they take are fettered in gold. And as for rubies and diamonds, they go forth on holy days and gather hem by the seashore to hang on their children's cots. This comes nearer to bring this comes nearer to being a description of Shakespeare's poetry than of the Indians in Virginia. Prospero in the Tempest, with his control over the mighty powers and harmonize of nature, is only the literary dream of that science which had just begun to grapple with the forces of the universe. Cabot, Drake, Frobisher, Gilbert, Raleigh, Willoughby, Hawkins, a score of explorers reveal a new earth to men's eyes, and instantly literature creates a new heaven to match it. So dreams and deeds increase side by side, and the dream is ever greater than the need. The dream is ever greater than the deed. That is the meaning of literature. To sum up, the age of Elizabeth was a time of intellectual liberty, of growing intelligence and comfort among all classes, of unbounded patriotism and of peace at home and abroad. For a parallel, we must go back to the age of Pericles in Athens, or of Augustus in Rome, or go forward a little to the magnificent court of Louis XIV, when Corneille, Racine, and Moliere brought the drama in France to the point where Marlowe, Shakespeare, and Johnson had left it in England half a century earlier. Such an age of great thought and great action, appealing to the eyes as well as to the imagination and intellect, finds but one adequate literary expression. Neither poetry nor the story can express the whole man, his thought, feeling, action, and the resulting character. Hence, in the age of Elizabeth, literature turned instinctively to the drama and brought it rapidly to the highest stage of its development. Dear friends, we study different historical events. While this time, when the Elizabethan age starts in 1550, just after 14 years, it was the important event in English literature. That was the birth of William Shakespeare in England. Sorry. At Stratford-on-Avon, he got birth for bringing new revolutionary changes in English literature. But before that, we see that what happened in India. India was discovered in 1498, and in 1600 British East India Company came in India for establishing their business in Delhi and covered the whole territory of the northern India. Dear friends, in 15th century, 1469, there was the birth of Shri Guru Nanak Dev Ji Maharaj. So these are the some important events in history that we study in 14th, 15th and 16th century literature in the Elizabethan Age. Especially we count 1550 to 1620 years. It is the 70 years time that is counted in the Elizabethan Age. During this time, various kind of literary items were written. Development of prose, Elizabethan prose. The Elizabethan Age refers to the period of Queen Elizabeth. Already we have studied its reason. The period was marked with vigorous intellectual thinking, explorations, adventure, and advent of the Renaissance spirit. All these factors left a great influence on the literature of the age. English prose took significant strides in the Elizabethan Age. Stimulus in this direction was given by the work of the translators who familiarized the reading public with Spanish and Italian romance and short stories. A lot of prose works with theme ranging from Platonic idealism to realism and romance were created. Romance dominated all types of literature. The most important prose romance of the period is John Lyly's Euphues, The Anatomy of Wit. He repeated the success in Euphues and his England. Sir Philip Sidney's Arcadia is also a pastoral romance. Arcadia is famous for its refined and ornate style as well as detailed pen portraits. In the Elizabethan Age, there was a flood of short prose pieces on religion, politics and literature. Pamphlets became very popular due to the availability of cheap mass printing. English pamphleteering was fresh and full of vigor. Notable pamphleteers of the age include Robert Greene, a dramatist, poet and pamphleteer who wrote 25 works which established him in the literary circle of the time. His short story, The Coney Catching tracts, became very famous along with his work Friar Bacon and Friar Bungay. Thomas Delany was known for his realistic prose fiction, though basically he was a pamphleteer and ballad writer. However, his novel The Gentle Craft also established him as a successful fiction writer. His narrative is devoted to the glorification of craft. Thomas Dekker, dramatist and writer of prose pamphlets, is known for his lively depiction of London life. He has given novels but social studies, and the best of them is the Girl's Own Book. The literature of the Elizabethan Age was not entirely based on imagination due to Renaissance and other social, political, and religious causes. Literary works were also based on intellectual and artistic themes. Francis Bacon, the first prose writer of the times, made a valuable contribution to the development of the English prose. Bacon published the first edition of his essays in 1597. Terseness of expressions and epigrammatic brevity are the most striking qualities of Bacon's style. Many writers focused on writing historical chronicles. Chief among them were Walter Raleigh, History of the World; Francis Bacon, History of the Religion of Henry VI; Fox, Acts and Monuments, or Books of Martyrs; and Raphael Holinshed, Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland. At a time when the spirit of adventure was strong, the literature of travel naturally flourished. Richard Hicklew's principles, navigations, voyages, traffics, and discoveries of the English nation is the best example of this genre. In the field of theology, a great deal of important work was done. Richard Hooker's Of the Laws of Ecclesiastical Polity is a sober, dignified, and closely reasoned defense of the Church of England. His book remains a standard work of theology and is at the same time a classic of English prose. Development of literary criticism in the Elizabethan age shows that people were beginning to be interested in the forms and principles of literature as an art. The best known of these treatises in the Sydney's Apology for Poetry. Other similar works of some importance are William Webb's Discourses of English Poetry and George Puterham's Art of English Poesy. Thus, we can say that the Elizabethan age was a period of great literary activity and prolific writing. English prose of the times became the popular medium of amusement and instruction. Dear friends, the 18th century highlights a change from court-centered and poetic literature to democratic, decentralized literary word of prose. Writers expressed their feelings towards the changing social and political conditions through pamphlets, magazines, journals, and newspapers. Novels and periodical papers are the two gifts of this century to English literature. Satire developed a form of literature due to the union of politics with literature. This period witnessed the development of simple, clear, well-reasoned and lucid prose style. Prose of the 18th century can be divided into two categories, non-fiction and fiction. The chief characteristics of the 18th century non-fiction literature are essays with the influence of Montaigne and Bacon came in vogue with varied themes like fashion, moral subjects, love affairs, politics, art, family, etc. Biographies and autobiographies were well received. Pamphlets, periodicals, newspapers, and epistles became the best medium to express political and religious controversies of the age. It was an age of great historical writings. Some of the most important non fiction writers of this age are as follows. The first one is George Berkeley, 1685 to 1753, a famous Irish philosopher. His works range from mathematics and economics to metaphysics and psychology. He was the major contributor to the theory of subjective idealism. His famous work on philosophy is a treatise concerning the principle of human knowledge. Then we have Adam Smith, 1723 to 90, a Scottish economist and philosopher who published Theory of Moral Sentiment, which covered the themes of ethics, rhetoric, jurisprudence, and political economy. With his wealth of nation, Smith established modern economic theory. The contribution of Joseph Addison, 1672 to 1719, and Richard Steele is immense in popularizing periodical essay. The main objective behind writing the periodical was to improvise the morals and social manners of the people. Jointly, they found the Daily Journal, the Spectator, and the Tatler. The combination of literature and journalism established these publications as a medium of cultural expression. John Dennis, 1657 to 1734, was a famous critic of the age. In his works, Ground of Criticism in Poetry, three letter on the Genius, and Writings of Shakespeare, Danish criticized Shakespeare for not adhering a poetical art. The period between 1696 to 1699 was the most fruitful period of the Jonathan Swift's 1667 to 1745 literary career. He published A Tale of Tub, a satire prose on religious extremes. His series of ironical pamphlets on the church, namely An Argument Against Abolishing Christianity, is also famous. Edward Gibbon, 1737 to 94, was the famous historian of the age, whose The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire offered the public a vivid narrative of the past. Edward Burke, 1729 to 97, an orator and political thinker, was an important figure in the history of political theory. His prominent works include A Vindication of Natural Society and a philosophical inquiry into the origin of our ideas of the sublime and beautiful. Dr. Samuel Johnson, 1709 to 84, was an essayist and literary historian, and he is particularly known for his A Dictionary of the English Language. Oliver Goldsmith, 1730 to 74, wrote essays, plays, novels, and poems. His prominent serial miscellany, The Bee Rain, for 8 weekly numbers, is The Citizen of the World, reflected the intellectual and political scenario of the age. The 18th century produced a number of biographers and writers of semi-public letters. Phillips Stanhope, 1694 to 1773, wrote famous letters full of wit, satire, and humor. James Boswell, 1740 to 95, the biographer of Dr. Johnson, devotedly presented Dr. Johnson's life and works. Dear friends, next, last but not the least, fiction. Realism of the age and the development of an excellent prose style greatly helped the evolution of novels. Some of the main characteristics of 18th century fiction are depiction of real life, preeminence of manners and sentiments, influence of Puritanism and later Methodism, arrival of the Picard's Convention, satiric analysis of human vices and follies, advent of the Bildungsroman narrative. Daniel Defoe, 1660 to 1731, wrote his mind in the form of fictional autobiographies or diaries to give his works realistic touches. His famous works include Moll Flanders, Roxana, and Robinson Crusoe. Lawrence Stern, 1718 to 68, popular work, The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, served as motivational force for many 20th century writers. It was intended by Stern as a comedy that reveals the ridiculousness of human vanity and life itself. Samuel Richardson, 1689 to 1761. First novel, Pamela, was an epistolary novel dealing with the theme of a youth, girls continually besieged virtue. His other works, such as Clarissa and Sir Charles Grandison, were also very popular. Horace Walpole, 1717 to 97, set out to create a completely different kind of novel in Castle of Otranto, where he tried to revolt against sentimental literature and novel of manners and brought out an entirely new form of fiction called Gothic novels. The history of Tom Jones is Henry Fielding's 1707 to 71, was a Scottish writer, and his works highlight the Picard's traditions as well as travel narratives. His prominent novels are The Adventures of Ferdinand Count Fathom, The Adventure of Sir Launcelot Greaves, and Roderick Random. Many female novelists such as Fanny Burney, Sarah Fielding, Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley, Mr. Annie Radcliffe also contributed to the development of this genre. Dear friends, you are listening the Elizabethan Age, which is very important for knowing the fundamentals and basics of English literature, language and grammar. Thank you.